The story of G02 kicks off around the 1960s when more and more radio amateurs began tuning in and quickly got hooked, drawn by its singular mystique and magnetic pull. Tied to the Cold War era, still ranks as one of the best-known number stations. From the 70s right through to the late 90s, it tore up the shortwave airwaves with his obsessive and hypnotic broadcasts. Each time, the station opened with the first notes of an exceedingly simple tune, played on a music box with a distorted metallic timbre, transforming it into a sinister call. Then an automated female voice, deliberately tweaked to sound childlike, began reading off endless blocks of numbers that seemed totally meaningless and random. Often, the blend of these elements created a sensory short circuit for listeners. The stark contrast between the eerie tune, its melody further warped by static and interference typical of shortwave, and the implied innocence of a childish voice. The nickname Swedish Rhapsody, according to some sources, was coined when the era's leading trade publications highlighted an excerpt from an essay by Langley Pierce. In it, the station opening motif was labeled Swedish Rhapsody, a composition by Hugo Alfven. In 2008, following the opening of Poland's state archives, researchers uncovered internal intelligence reports with previously undisclosed details about G02. Among them, the exact identity of the station's opening melody. It was the Luxembourg polka, a rearranged version of Alfven's composition, published in the 1950s by Emil Reisdorf. However, the two pieces are essentially identical, especially in the opening bars. Administration was first handed to the Polish state security, the communist regime's secret police. After the Berlin Wall fell, it moved on to the Office of State Protection, Poland's new intelligence agency set up in 1990, which ran it until the station was decommissioned. G02 ran on a pretty intricate schedule. It only aired in selected weeks, and even then, just from Saturday through Thursday. Transmission started mainly on the hour and more rarely on the half hour. Times varied by day, and broadcasts were modulated by alternating between AM and double sideband. Traffic could be transmitted on up to 3 parallel frequencies. However, as Simon Mason observes in his book Secret Signals, this rarely happened. For years, Swedish Rhapsody's broadcasts ran punctually and regularly until April 1st, 1998, when they were abruptly replaced by a shortened variant called G02A. Broadcasts no longer ran 6 days a week, but only on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings. Overall, traffic was markedly lower than before. Each transmission carried 3 messages and opened with a shorter musical intro. AM double sideband modulation was phased out in favor of USB only. A few days later, on April 20th, this version was also shut down. It was replaced permanently by E23, an English-language station. It inherited the G02A schedule, but employed a slightly different message format. The traditional music box melody intro was replaced by a count from 0 to 9, with each digit repeated 5 times. Messages were delivered by the same voice used on E05. All other structural elements remained unchanged. In the documents declassified in 2008, there is neither information on the discontinuation of Swedish Rhapsody nor details on the operations of E23. However, it's plausible that G02 broadcasts ceased as a result of Poland's entry into NATO. It was replaced by a station that could be considered the product of collaboration between Polish intelligence services and those of NATO member states. Since January 2007, when it was last reported, the station hasn't been heard again. The information in the documents declassified in 2008 goes well beyond merely identifying the track Luxembourg Polka. It remains one of the few documented records of the numbers stations phenomenon and their operations. Among them, 2 reports from 1975 and 1976 really stand out, offering insight into how G02 worked and the mechanisms that kept it running. The first report, dated May 20th, 1975, details the cipher training given to a field operative codenamed G02.
I started the training in Agency Cipher KOS2 in July 1974. I taught G02 all elements relevant to this type of cipher. After mastering the principles of ciphering, from August 1974 until now, there is systematic ciphered correspondence with him through radio 1 message per week. In a few meetings with him, I talked about issues with ciphering and behavior while ciphering in terms of cipher safety, maintaining conspiracy while ciphering. I established a safety signal in case of the cipher was captured by counterintelligence.
10 days later, a further report follows, which speaks of an agreement regarding one-way communications from the Secret Service Central to Agent G02. This document is important because it provides a detailed description of planned broadcast activities. Each listed structural element aligns perfectly with those of G02, particularly in terms of formats, and establishes the strict protocol that recipient agents must follow.
Agreement about one-way radio communication in the direction central agent. General principles. In this channel, communication will be maintained over radio in German. The given radio information will enable transmitting messages from central to correspondent in the region of Western Europe. Transmission procedure. Signal identifying central. The signal that identifies central is a melody of Luxembourg polka from a music box. The signal is emitted for 6 minutes for the purpose of tuning. Hailing. After the tuning signal, proceeds reading of hailing numbers for correspondents who can be between 1 and 3 at a time. The hailing numbers are 5 digits long and change for every message. Hailing numbers are decided by the cipher section. Hailing is repeated 3 times. Reading of text. After hailing follows the reading of the text. Before the text, the hailing number is repeated twice, but only the one for whom the message is intended. Messages are read in order of hailing. Each 5-digit group is read twice and each digit is read separately. At the end of the message, the word "end" is sent, which indicates the end of the message. Message length. Messages have a static length, 100 or 50 groups. The number of relevant groups the correspondent can know from the hailing number according to previous communication with the cipher section. If the correspondent is sent a message with more than 100 groups, the message will be divided and sent under the same hailing number. The maximum number of groups cannot be more than 250. In case of transmitting a message longer than 100 groups, the case officer must be able to communicate with other workers using the same seance.
Broadcasts carrying a single message took about 17 to 20 minutes to complete. In the triple message format, they ran roughly 38 to 40 minutes. Until 1988, only the 3-message format was noted. From that year on, some of the schedules started sending only 1 message, and some started including counting during the intro. The report then dives into the specific operating steps for listening to broadcasts. These guidelines provide a rare, behind-the-scenes look at how intelligence agents received messages and the precautions they took to do so safely, a side of number stations seldom explored. As a result, these documents carry undeniable weight in support of the thesis that such encrypted transmissions have long served as a secure communication tool for the world's leading intelligence services.
Operative condition for reception. The correspondent taught the method for determining his variable hailing number. The transmission should be received on a transistor receiver of high quality that has A. Correct frequency ranges, B. Battery power, C. Fine-tune for exact tuning, D. Ability to receive into headphones with loudspeaker turned off. Transmission should be received using the built-in antenna of the receiver, using battery power and the grid power disconnected. Reception should be done in a place secured against intrusion from strangers. It is forbidden. A. Reception using receivers on grid power. B. Reception using loudspeakers. C. Reception using external antennas. D. Reception in a car or in a public place like hotels, train stations, parks, open spaces, and so on. E. It is not recommended to record the transmissions on a tape recorder due to the difficulty of fast erasing or destruction of the tape.
The protocol, clear and concise, mirrors Swedish Rhapsody's management, widely regarded as professional. It's evident that every detail was meticulously planned to guarantee message reception while minimizing risk. Between 1975 and 1980, the R3M54, produced in the Soviet Union, was the most common receiver of its kind across the communist bloc. It incorporated all the features specified by the protocol and was readily available on the market. Excellent reception and tuning without the use of an external antenna, headphone listening, and rechargeable battery power. The report of May 30th concludes with two specific operational provisions. The first point concerns messages that have already been encrypted. It is not clear what the 9th section's role was in transmissions, given that the security service underwent several reorganizations over the years. The most plausible hypothesis is that it dealt with the technologies applied in the various operations. The next entry is addressed to the 2nd section, likely tasked with counterintelligence. This passage confirms the station's organizational and managerial soundness. Swedish Rhapsody employed two seasonal frequency bands for its transmissions, maximizing signal integrity in the face of interference or variations in ionospheric propagation. The entire system is fully compatible with the note regarding quarterly frequency checks. The last document, dated June 11, 1976, represents the final piece in the mosaic of the station's organizational structure and reception protocols. In this memorandum, once again concerning G02, it provides the addresses and contact hours of the agency representatives ahead of his trip to Switzerland, and a summary of the specific procedure by which Swedish Rhapsody will send G02 orders and notices. Next, the transmission's start times and their frequencies are noted. However, the lack of detail and limited understanding of the historical context of 1976 make them harder to interpret. In conclusion, opening the Polish state archives has uncovered documents of remarkable value, offering an unprecedented perspective on G02 and shedding light on details that were previously unknown. It is by no means obvious to consider number stations intelligence tools. Their use has been confirmed in only a few instances and solely in recent times. For decades, institutions and trade publications denied the evidence. As Simon Mason shows in his book, they ignored the phenomenon and anyone who dared to ask questions. Despite the atmosphere of secrecy, they have consistently sought useful clues and gathered data on their activities, laying the groundwork for our current understanding of the phenomenon. However, while valuable, the documents from the Polish Communist archives do not provide definitive proof applicable to all number stations. The data uncovered on Swedish Rhapsody remain only a small fraction of the vast material produced by the Polish government over the years. Distorted music box at the start of each broadcast, with the simplicity of its melody, the long numeric sequences delivered by a cold and childlike female synthetic voice, the unusual absence of numeric counts in any format, and broadcasts orchestrated with meticulous punctuality and precision. These unique elements have imprinted G02 on the memories of many, making it one of the most recognizable and, in some respects, unsettling stations.